Hello everyone and welcome to today's show. We have a special guest with us today. We have Ben Habib, who is a former Brexit MEP, businessman, and a guy who actually really cares about this country.
I do.
Yeah, one of the few. Welcome to the show, Harry.
Well, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, we can't shake hands apparently, so we do a wave.
Yeah,
How's life going during the whole lockdown stuff?
yeah, well, I mean, life is now getting slowly back to normal.
Yep.
Lockdown for me wasn't too bad. I like staying fit, so I used to get up in the morning and go for a run. You couldn't go to the gym, but I'd go for a run. That was allowed. Came back, did some weights at home, did some sit-ups, did some stretching, had a shower. And actually, because I'm CEO of my company and no one else was in the office and someone had to be here to pay bills and stuff, I'd basically come into the office every day, Boris bike in. So I had a kind of normal lockdown. I couldn't go to restaurants or anything, but I had a sort of fairly normal lockdown.
Still active, yeah. There's a lot still happening despite the lockdown stuff. Brexit negotiations, the trade deal negotiations, still going on.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have experience in business, especially internationally. I know you've had your views when it comes to the withdrawal agreement, the way that was sorted out, and everything. Firstly, what do you think is going to happen? But also, considering we had the withdrawal agreement, is there any way for us during these negotiations to basically fix it and get the best out of it, or are we stuck forever?
Well, it's very interesting. Of particular interest to me is now seeing some of the Tories who backed the withdrawal agreement unequivocally during the election, saying that it was an oven-ready, fantastic deal, now coming out and recognising that there was some fundamental weaknesses in it. And I remember I used to bang on about it so much during the election that my children's friends used to call me Mr. Withdrawal Agreement. I mean, that's how bad it got. But and I still have a propensity to bang on about it because I think that you've got to look at the detail of a document in order to understand the direction of travel. And no amount of political rhetoric gets over what a document says, And so a lot of people have said to me in the past, Ben, you're not seeing this through a political prism. You're looking at it too much like a contract in business.
Well, it is.
But it is. That's exactly what it is. It is a binding contract. And I think it's very, very difficult now for the government to actually fulfill its manifesto pledges, which, just to remind people who are listening, the manifesto pledges were control of our borders, our cash, our laws. And actually, I don't think that's possible now.
Yes, I think that's the thing. When it comes to things that are more logical or especially legal in politics, most of the time the people in politics and politicians themselves and media tend to ignore it and they just go with the political rhetoric or the emotional side. Same thing applied to what happened during the lockdown, the guidelines, and especially with the bill that was introduced to give more power to the state. A lot of people are just like, it's fine. Obviously, it's for a good cause. The intention is good. So
people go with what they're told.
Yeah.
I've got no issue with that.
Yeah,
the populace and the electorate, however which way you wish to refer to them, have a right to believe in their government.
Yeah.
And they have a right to act in complete confidence that the direction they've been given is the correct direction. It's really interesting, just talking about the lockdown for a second. I read a poll this morning that people in the United Kingdom think that up to 10% of the population has died from the virus. Did you see that?
Yeah.
That would be 6.5 million deaths.
And in reality, it's 0.07%.
Exactly, it's nothing. Yeah, it's very, very little. But so I think the government rhetoric on the lockdown has people petrified, and that was presumably the aim of the rhetoric, so that people adhere to the lockdown. And I'm skipping ahead perhaps in terms of this interview, but that's created quite a devil's job for the government to get people back to work because people are now so scared. It's hard for the government to encourage them to come back out and get the economy going again.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about the whole the economic side of what's happening post-lockdown and this new normal life that we have apparently. But there's also other things, because we mentioned Brexit, but one of the biggest things that's actually happening now is migration, illegal migration. Isn't it interesting that it's actually happening? I mean, it's been happening for a long time anyway, especially Dover. It feels like it's just increasing when it comes to this year, this summer, when spring, because every summer it gets bad. Is it just because they feel like the smugglers and everybody feel like governments, especially the British government, are too busy with other things. So let's just take everybody in. Like,
well, I suspect it's been going on like this for a long time. We're just beginning to notice
to
see it, and you know, it's kind of ironic because the government has talked tough on immigration, and Priti Patel's come out with this new immigration policy, which quite rightly requires, you know, people coming into the country to have some value to the country. You know, that's the basic premise of the new policy. But of course, at the same time as that, we've got this kind of total tolerance to people coming illegally across the channel in dinghies. And, you know, they're coming in not small numbers, by the way. It's about a couple of hundred a week, I think, from what I read. You know, that adds up pretty damn quickly.
But I think the thing is, you mentioned the new Australian-based kind of point-based system.
Yeah.
That doesn't really stop the illegal migration. That's, you know,
it doesn't do anything.
That's the legal process of it.
Yeah.
You know, you could have that in place, but people can still come in.
Absolutely, but it makes a mockery of the policy, though, doesn't it? If you've got an immigration policy that's all to do with points-based and value add, and through the back door people are just walking in without any checks on them, and being put up in hotels, as far as I'm aware, given a really good lifestyle, and to the point where they complain if they have to eat meals at a particular time. Did you pick that up? Which I thought was extraordinary.
It's brilliant. I think that the issue I have, yes, there is still a legal side when it comes to international law and agreements that countries have, and the Geneva Convention and everything. Yeah. But surely there must be a way. I know Priti Patel has said that she wants to change international law on this issue, but it takes some time. The same people who they could put through a bill in Parliament through like half an hour for the lockdown stuff or Brexit.
Well, the government needs to take a tough line, and you know, just to remind viewers what's happening, the French Navy is escorting these people to the extent of French waters, and then our Navy is doing nothing to stop them, and they're coming happily into the United Kingdom. There is absolutely no reason for these people, having made it safely into France, which is presumably what they've done, to then have to come to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
They're not really asylum seekers, because if they were asylum seekers, they'd stay in France.
They were asylum seekers in the original country, whether it's France or Germany or somewhere else.
Exactly. And I think we need to take, irrespective of the Geneva Convention, we need to take a tough line with the French and say, we're not going to take these people into our waters, and we should deter them at the point that they enter British waters.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. So these people come in, at this point, I would call them migrants rather than anything else, because they were already in France. But then when they come here, when the border force actually bring them in, put them in hotels and everything, then they start the process of the application to actually see if they can get accepted or not. Why should they even go through the process?
I know.
You know, just
they've come illegally. Send them straight back.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, what's your message to Priti Patel if she was like sitting right here?
Well, I think Priti's her heart is in the right place. She wants to do the right thing. For some reason, she's not doing it, and I think she needs to get rough. She's obviously been a bit rough with some of her advisors. She needs to be rough with the civil servants and make sure they do what the politicians want, you know, make sure they do what she wants.
I think I do believe that, because I have spoken to her in the past, like casually, about a lot of issues. I know she cares, because a lot of people think that look at the policy and what's happening. Obviously, the first person to blame is Priti Patel, then Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. But I do believe that there's a lot of issues when you're in central government, you're in business, you know that even business could get bureaucratic. You've got the civil service, you've got the cabinet. You probably have a couple of ministers who are not happy about changing the situation. I don't know. There's a lot of advisors, a lot of civil servants going around. So I think there is that issue, and I think, you know,
I think that's a huge issue. I mean, she can be pulling the lever, wanting something to happen, and the lever doesn't result in any action. Because the blob is the kind of civil service blob, the swamp is getting in the way. And I mean, I really do hope that the Prime Minister, and I know Dominic Cummings is credited with a lot of the moves behind this, but I really hope they succeed, those two, succeed in breaking up the civil service and making it more responsive to what the politicians want, not what they want.
Exactly. I think, but that's the thing, we're talking about the civil service, politicians, we're going through this new normal, post-lockdown economy. And I know that you have a project, Unlocked, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that, but also, how do you see this new normal in terms of economically? Because the government wants to just throw money at it and borrow because low interest rates. Is this the right approach? What's the best approach?
Well, I mean, there are two factors at play as far as getting the economy going is concerned. The first is the fear factor. And I think the most important thing, leave aside government stimulus, government incentives and so on, the most important thing the Prime Minister needs to do is to give people confidence to come back out. And I'm afraid the messaging from the government has been really poor on that. You know, if you look at Office of National Statistics figures, so these are not my production or some trade body or some unaccredited view, these are ONS's figures. Only 0.07%, as you mentioned, of the English population have actually got the virus at the moment. That's 35,000 people in England have the virus. The chances of you bumping into someone is 0.07%. So the chances of you not meeting someone who's got the virus are 99.93%.
And the majority of them are care homes and hospitals anyway. They're not really
Absolutely.
out there.
So, you know, the chances of meeting someone who's got the virus are minuscule. The chances of getting it are even smaller. The chances of having any serious infection from it are even smaller than that. So the virus is not going to kill you. You're more likely to be hit by lightning right now than you are to die of COVID-19. And I think that positive message needs to come out from government. It's statistically based. It's not a matter of following the science. It's just stats. It's just a matter of fact. You know.
I think that's the thing. So historically, well, recent history, this government with Boris Johnson, they've been very good with messaging. Like whether it was get Brexit done or this, like the messaging kind of worked. Even the beginning of the guidelines, you know, the stay-at-home stuff, that worked. Obviously, scared
that
people.
worked.
But now the new messaging that they're now trying to get people out. Get out, like go back to work. It's not working.
It's not working.
They scare people so much.
They've scared people so much, and as you say, the initial messaging was fantastic.
Yeah.
Because the idea was to scare people, make sure they stay at home, and they've succeeded. And they also did. You know, there was the second aspect of this is the economic aspect, and they instituted a furlough scheme and they made loans available to businesses and so on, which was exactly the right thing to do. If you're going to put the economy down into a coma, you need to sustain the patient while it's going through that coma. So I completely support the government measures that they put in place. But of course, that creates peculiar incentives as well. So now people are receiving quite a large amount of their income without having to go to work, without having to do any work. You know, why would they want to go back to work?
Exactly.
You know, it's entirely rational. I don't agree with it, but it's entirely rational for teachers to say, well, you know, why should I go back to work? I can get 80% of my money sitting at home rather than having to go and teach some, you know, snivelling children in school. It's the wrong attitude because, you know, that's not what they're employed to do. But the economic incentive encourages them to stay at home. And one of the things I was trying to champion, one of the reasons Unlock was created was to try and produce ideas, engaging with communities, producing ideas which we can then feed into government to come out of lockdown with confidence instilled in the people, as well as an economic incentive for people to get back to work. And one of the original ideas that I had was a reverse furlough scheme, so that you incentivize companies to take back employees that they had previously furloughed, paying them an ongoing sum, maybe nowhere near as generous as the furlough scheme, but an ongoing sum to take those employees back and keeping them employed so that we don't have a spike in unemployment. And actually penalising companies that make redundancies having taken advantage of the furlough scheme. And that's not conventional wisdom.
Of course,
but these are not conventional times, and so you need unconventional solutions. The government partially picked up on it. You know, Rishi Sunak has announced £1,000 for companies that take back employees up to a certain, a fairly low salary level. I think it's about £570 a week or something. There's a limit on it. So he partially picked up on it, but I think he needed to go bigger on that to incentivize companies to take people back. Because the biggest problem we've got is mass unemployment, and that is coming down the road. We're going to have unfortunately now, I think there's no option. We're going to have mass unemployment in October.
I think we're slightly luckier than if it was, you know, a couple of decades ago. It's because we spent the last 10-15 years in the UK, especially London. We've become a hub for startups, especially tech and other sectors too. So I think it could have been even worse if this had happened, for example, in the 80s or
It
70s.
would have been a lot worse. You're quite right,
So
because
there's
at
no
least,
opportunity now.
at least now we've got the vast majority of the British economy turns on jobs which can be done from home.
That's true. Yeah.
So 30 years ago we were still quite an industrial. Before Maggie
Yes.
got rid. Well, actually, no. Sorry, Maggie was. She's gone 30 years ago. I'm getting
Yes,
older.
yes.
I'm getting older faster.
It's going fast.
40 years ago, it would have been quite problematic, because you would have had
course,
to shut down manufacturing facilities across the country.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't believe in Keynesianism. I'm more of a kind of classical liberal free market capitalist.
So am I, by the way.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you in terms of generally what you view as.
I am classic Thatcherite
Yeah.
in my fiscal
Yes.
policies.
Of course.
But at the moment,
Yeah.
I think, given where we are, we've got to take a more interventionist approach
Yeah.
to getting the economy back up again. I wouldn't do quite what the government is doing. The government's idea, I think, is to spend big.
Yeah,
And
because of low interest rates, they can just borrow.
They borrow and build. That's the government thing.
Build.
And actually, what I would do is less building, and I would cut more taxes for the private sector,
Yes.
so that the private sector is incentivized to get back to work. And I wouldn't cut taxes on profits. I think that's fine to go on taxing profits at whatever rate we were taxing them before. But I would get rid of taxes on turnover.
Okay.
And so the kind of taxes that would be in my crosshairs.
Corporation tax.
No, not corporation.
So that
would
go with
be
dividend, right?
the kind of taxes that would be in my crosshairs are VAT,
Right.
employers' national insurance,
Yep.
stamp duty, which he has cut for properties up to $500,000
Yep.
for a short period. I would also target tax on fuel,
Right.
which disproportionately punishes poorer people.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard, and they're the ones who are going to be made unemployed. The poorer people. It's the well-off white-collar workers
They'll
who
be
can
fine.
work from home will be fine. And I'd be looking at those turnover-related taxes and really hitting them hard. And then the other thing I'd be doing is deregulating, which costs the government nothing, but costs businesses a lot of money. So, for example, I would be deregulating employment law so that companies are not shy of employing people. I would be deregulating some of the financial regulations emanating from Europe.
Yes.
I'd use this opportunity of Brexit to get rid of some of that. I'd be looking very carefully at procurement law. For example, under EU law, we've got all governments have to tender everything to, to companies from across Europe. We should be putting a policy in place for buy British first. So there are lots of different regulatory things that we can hit, which cost us nothing.
Yeah. But it helps the consumers and the businesses to keep going.
Yeah. And I haven't seen any of that from the government. Oh, sorry. Have to correct myself. Last night they did announce some fairly sweeping. I haven't read them in detail yet. Sweeping deregulation of the planning system.
Oh, that's good.
Which I think is great, because that will allow private sector to start building homes, etc., and that gets the economy going as well. I need to look at precisely what it is that they have planned, but I would really be looking at regulations carefully and getting rid of all surplus regulations at the moment.
I think Rishi Sunak, historically, has always also been very sound economically. He was similar to Sajid Javid, but both of them, when they became Chancellor, obviously they become interventionists. That's just how the nature of the Treasury is. I get that, but I think one of the issues is, first, they're always afraid of the electorate, because, it's politicians, short-termism, but also the media. You've been there. You were a politician for that period of time during Brexit, and you've dealt with the media. What's your take on the way this whole society is going, the way media shifts the narrative, creates the narrative? It's no longer ordinary people or even politicians. What's your view on everything?
Well, I find the whole media landscape deeply distressing. Ofcom seems to me to be a body that itself has been hijacked by what I would call neoliberal, urban, dictatorial wokeism. And if Ofcom's been hijacked by that, it's no surprise that the BBC and Sky are heading in that. I don't think Sky's as bad as the BBC.
Sky's getting worse than the BBC at times.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, I've spoken to a number of friends who work in media. Obviously, I can't name them because they have these big jobs, but they said the way things are going, Sky is getting worse than the BBC, which is I think it's because the BBC still has that charter that kind of keeps them. you can't be obviously biased.
Yeah.
But I think it's still a problem. The news just came out that the BBC are hiring a few hundred agents to go after the over 50s and over 60s who are cancelling their TV license.
Oh, absolutely they are.
That's embarrassing.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely.
This is 1984.
I know, it's incredible. It's incredible. They're going to pursue aggressively those people who aren't paying the license fee.
What's your view on this whole over 75s license? I mean, because
I think the license fee should be abolished.
Okay, so you're generally against it like me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The license fee should be abolished. There is no place to pay a license fee in 2020 for a media channel. And by the way, I think the BBC is a dinosaur that's going to die its own death, because the young aren't going to pay this fee. They can get their news and their entertainment without paying anything to the BBC. True. And the more I speak to people, the more I realise they're actually using all sorts of media channels other than terrestrial television to get their info. So I think the BBC, unless it reinvents itself fast, is going to find itself progressively marginalised and eventually bust.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, the best solution for the government, essentially, because it's still part of the state, even though it's separate, is to save it before it dies by privatising it, whether it's ad-based or subscription-based. But do you think, I mean, which method do you think is actually could be best? Like, because these days with adverts, or because Sky News worked with adverts.
Yeah, I mean, I would frankly, I would give the BBC a 12-month transition period.
Yeah. Now you're in favour of transition periods.
I'd give them a 12-month transition period and say, your license fee is switched off in 12 months.
Okay.
And you're free. Yeah, you're free to act like any commercial broadcaster.
Right.
And off you go.
That's actually quite logical. I mean, you're in business. I'm not surprised that you said that. I think that's the best way to do it, because you create some sort of time.
Yeah, to give them a bit of time to reposition themselves, and
and they won't feel like it's been imposed onto them, like someone else making decision in terms of the new structure. It's not the government, politicians, or people.
Yeah, they can make their own decision.
If they fail,
on their
they
own
fail.
2 feet. Absolutely, like the rest of us in life.
Right. Have you had any personal experience with the BBC or any other kind of channel in terms of bias or?
Well, I think undoubtedly during my time as a politician, we got the Brexit Party got much less airtime than the more left-leaning Liberal Democrats and Remain faction of the Tory Party and the Labour Party. They just get more airtime.
Yeah.
And you can't help but feel when you're being questioned by interviewers that actually they're trying to shut you down the minute you're making a valid point, because they've got their own underlying agenda. I'm very aware of the symbiotic relationship that politicians have with the media, and we need them as much as they need us.
Sure.
So you won't find me banging the table, calling out any particular interviewer, but I think there is undoubtedly a trend.
It's a cultural thing inside.
There's a cultural thing,
I get it, because you mentioned the European Parliament days. There was that period when you guys in the chamber protested against the EU anthem, which was quite peaceful. But then the Liberal Democrats wore the t-shirts B2 Brexit, obviously we can't say that. Ofcom. And they didn't get any criticism from the media. I remember Politics Live and Question Time. You guys got criticism.
Absolutely. They had a swear word
I know.
on some pretty horrible looking yellow collarless t-shirts. And all we did, actually under duress, because the protest that we were going to make, people may not be aware of this, the protest we were going to make was simply to sit still, not to stand up. And
Well, you have to stand.
And you're meant to stand, but lots of people in the chamber weren't standing, not just us. And the speaker said, "Stand for the country's anthem."
Country's anthem.
For the country's anthem.
Brilliant.
And we stood up, and I can't remember whether Nigel took the lead or whether it was spontaneous. Someone turned their back, and we all turned our backs.
That doesn't turn out to be Yeah, it was probably either Nigel or Richard Tyson.
Exactly.
That's actually very interesting, but you guys got a lot of criticism.
We got a lot of frack. We made the front page of the FT.
Well, it worked. I mean, you got the attention. So that was funny. I mean, I think, but going back to the BBC, I think it's not necessarily just the BBC. It's Ofcom. I think my problem is Ofcom.
It's Ofcom.
The culture they've created.
That's why I started with Ofcom.
Yeah, I think.
And actually, I think what this country badly needs is a balancing act.
Yeah.
Ofcom needs reforming, and it needs a balancing act. We we don't want a Fox News because
Not
I
completely.
think that's kind of overtly right wing, and
Yeah.
but we need something over on the other side of the political spectrum,
Yeah.
a neutral
Sure.
outlet which actually gives all voices, as long as they're not espousing, hate crimes.
Yes.
Gives all voices an equal opportunity to express their views.
Sort of like the Times when it comes to newspapers. They try their best to.
Yeah, or maybe the Telegraph.
The Telegraph. That's a different one. But no, yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. We could talk about these sort of things for a long time. But I just want to say thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you.
And any last few words, like maybe positive words, optimism
Well,
during these dark days.
Well, I'm very optimistic. I think London is the greatest city in the world.
Yeah.
And I think, notwithstanding the very low flows of people through London at the moment, the absence of tourists, the difficulty the hospitality sector is suffering, I think we will get back on our feet with or without government support, because we are the greatest city in the world. So I look forward to that.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank
I'll
you.
see you soon.